All right, everyone. So, wrestling historian Pat LePadre, he talked about the Netflix documentary in the Montreal Screwjob and its portrayal, and he says that they had a false narrative in there about it. So, we're going to read his tweet. Another false narrative in the Netflix McMahon doc: Brett was not going to leave the WWF with the title. He was under contract until December and had agreed to lose the title against someone else than Shawn, and not in Canada. Springfield, Massachusetts was talked about. The right narrative should be that Vince was afraid that Bischoff would announce Brett's signing on Nitro on November 10th, but Brett had specifically asked Eric not to do that, and Eric had agreed. Vince wanted Shawn as champion and made it happen, but he was wrong here. You can't blame Brett. He had creative control clause on his last month with the company, therefore could indeed decide who he would lose the title to, or in this case, who he didn't want to lose the title to. And it's Vince who gave him that power with that clause. So he's saying, hey, this is a phony narrative because, of all these things. But I think the one problem I have here is that he's what he's missing about this, because when you look back at it now, okay, we know how everything turned out, right? We know how the Monday Night War turned out. We know how all this stuff turned out. But if you're Vince and you've seen this already happen before, right? You've already seen a title show up on WCW airwaves. You've already kind of seen the way that, look, Eric Bischoff was spoiling shows. Eric Bischoff was doing all this stuff. So you knew that they were trying everything they could to beat you. And I just don't think all of this stuff necessarily makes a whole lot of sense. Like even this last part, or I don't want to say this makes sense because it's probably all true, but it doesn't make it seem as simple as I think it does looking back. Like even this last part that says you can't blame Brett. He had a creative control clause on his last month with the company, therefore could indeed decide who he would lose the title to, or in this case, who he didn't want to lose the title to. So that even in the documentary, Vince talks about I made a mistake with that contract, right? So he's not denying that. But what Vince is saying here is that listen, he goes to Brett. He says, "This is how you get out of our contracts. You can go get a better contract from WCW because I can't afford to keep you on the one I signed." So Vince admits to that mistake. But what comes after is Vince is trying to basically say, "Listen, we cannot have this title show up on WCW. It has to be this way, so you have to lose it." And I just, it's tough for me. It's not that I'm siding with Vince on this because it's more in the middle, but on some level, right? It's just tough to sit there and go, yeah, we're going to risk it and we're just going to hope he decides not to do it. And I get it. I understand why people may be on Brett's side. I think it worked out for everybody kind of in the end in terms of, especially for WWE, but I just think this is an important, aspect to think about is what he was going through at that time. Now, to be fair, I think certainly a better argument here, rather than bringing up, some of these things, is the better argument here is why didn't Vince find a different way to get the belt to Shawn? There are a million and one ways Vince could have done things to make sure that, okay, Shawn Michaels, because the problem was not Brett losing the title. That's not what Brett cared about. What he cared about was losing it to Shawn and where it was located. And so why he couldn't have had that happen prior. Like to me, this seems like a simple thing, really. I mean, even if the story isn't as well told as you may like it to be, if your concern here is I have to get the title off Brett, then you figure out a way to do that. Versus how Vince did it is Vince kind of was stuck in his way of listen, this is where it's going to happen. We don't want to change the story at all because you're leaving. And I think that's a fair critique, right? It's a fair critique to say, listen, maybe Brett should, just be doing what, maybe Brett should just be doing what he's supposed to be doing and, listening to the directive by, the boss. But at the same time, if the boss knows he doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to do this, well, it's on him to kind of find a different way that works out for everybody. And as it happened, right, it became a big controversy. Whereas if kind of Vince had done something else, it wouldn't have been. Now, once again, we could argue whether that was good, bad, or indifferent. But truly, this is one of those things to me that it's tough to come down on one side. It's tough to say I'm 100% behind either one because I think there are arguments to be made both ways. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.